The better story is in that locker room, the Baltimore Ravens locker room, because that is the losing locker room. So let us discuss now. What do you make of Lamar Jackson? Let's just cut to the chase here. We don't have to beat around the bush. Lamar Jackson's performance against the Chiefs, to say it was substandard is doing a disservice to the word substandard. Now, let's begin with Lamar Jackson, who had an opportunity. Now, he's still a young guy. He's early in his career. He's finding his way. He's already won an MVP. But this was an opportunity to rewrite the story about Lamar Jackson. The story on Lamar Jackson, paper tiger, that's the story. Right? This guy against the Cleveland Browns and the bad teams of football is Adonis. He's a god. And then he's the Tin Man when he plays the better teams. Now, in this game, he had an opportunity, and he not only played the game, he failed spectacularly. Now, the Chiefs, I do not believe, have a top-notch defense. I think they have a good defense, but not a great defense. The Chiefs' defense feasted on the many weaknesses of Lamar Jackson. And while considered a contemporary, and rightfully so, an equal to Patrick Mahomes, these guys are as different as night and day. And all you have to do is look at the game box score, but it really isn't even as telling as it was in the first half. The game was over at halftime. Now, we'll get to that in a second, but Lamar Jackson completed a little over 50% of his passes for less than 100 yards. He averaged 3.5 yards per pass attempt. Not per run attempt. Per running, he was averaging, I think it was like 9 yards a rush or something like that. He was very effective running, although he didn't run that much. He had 83 yards on 9 carries, but 3.5 yards per pass. He was sacked 4 times, including a couple of back-breaking sacks, back-to-back plays for Baltimore, and he ends up with a passer rating of 73.1. He also had 2 fumbles, including one of the fumbles which he lost. So, again, better running than throwing. That's been the knock on Lamar Jackson. When the things get tight down against the better teams in the playoffs, for example, or in this case against a good regular season opponent, well, he's nowhere to be seen. So this was a, say it with me now, disheartening reality check for John Harbaugh and the big guys there in Baltimore, because Lamar Jackson, he sucked at a time you cannot suck. So if you are one of these people that are in denial and say, no, it's not his fault, it's the offensive line's fault, it's the receiver's fault, it's this guy's fault, that guy's fault, stop. Accountability. Try it. Open your eyes. Lamar Jackson, until proven otherwise, is the NFL's PG-13. He is Paul George. That is what Lamar Jackson is. He's a great ball player against bad opponents who becomes a vampire at the key moments, right? When exposed to sunlight or good teams / playoffs, said player vanishes. And hey, I just call it like it is. It's depressing. If you're a Baltimore fan, it's depressing, because very rarely when a player establishes that as their reputation, does said player change that reputation. It does happen once in a blue moon, but it is a very rare occurrence when that happens. And the other thing, which is all tied together with Paul, my analysis that he's the Paul George of football, Lamar Jackson, he's a show pony, right? He is a classical front runner. And the evidence on that, you've got the eyeball test and also the stats. The stats tell you that as well. Lamar Jackson is now 0-5 in games where his team has trailed by 10 or more points. So he have been completely unable to lead the Ravens back in his brief NFL career when trailing by 10 or more points. There are reasons for that. The Ravens also the only team in the NFL without a single win when trailing after halftime in that span since Lamar took over. So, hey, listen, when he's got the lead, there is no quarterback I would rather have in the entire NFL than Lamar Jackson nursing a lead, right? Nurse the baby, rock the baby, rock the baby. That Lamar's good at that. The problem is you're not going to be leading every game. You're going to have to occasionally dig yourself out with your shovel and dig yourself out of the hole with a lead. giving Lamar Jackson a lead. This guy is a flamethrower. He's a flamethrower. But the moment you're down by 10 points or more, he's a wet box of matches. That's what he becomes. Right? The tables are turned, and you got to dig yourself out of the hole. The walls start caving in. And he looked like a guy in this game that should be selling commercial real estate, is what he looked like. That was playoff Lamar. We hear about playoff PG-13, playoff Paul, playoff P. That's the football version. Now, in the playoffs, if you've forgotten, he's had 2 playoff games, Lamar Jackson, 0-2. He's completed about 50% of his passes for a passer rating of close to 70. Where do I sense those numbers? Those are the same numbers he had against the Chiefs, although his yards per pass fattened up in garbage time of those playoff games, but he's got 4 fumbles in 2 playoff games and 3 interceptions. And the stat many people are pointing out, Lamar Jackson is 21-1 as a starter in his NFL career against everyone except Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, where he is 0-3 against them. Now, part B of this Maller monologue, the Chiefs and Ravens are both going to win a ton of regular season games. And I'm not saying you sell your stock in the Ravens. That's not the point of this little exercise. The Monday Night Football game was a placement test to see how you match up toe-to-toe, shoulder-to-shoulder, eye-to-eye. And we know what happened. This was the epitome of a message in a bottle by Kansas City. The Chiefs had 29 first downs. They had 13 attempts on third down. They converted 10 of them. That's a 77% conversion rate on third down. They racked up 517 yards of offense. You want me to go on? The Ravens had 228. Andy Reid dressed up. Now, he had that dopey mask on again, the clear mask, which I think is the way to go. If you got to wear a mask, if they're going to force you, Big Brother's going to force you to wear a mask on the sidelines in an NFL game, which is dopey anyway, because of all the testing that's being done. But if they're going to force you to do that for virtue signaling, I do recommend the Andy Reid clear mask. That's a better mask than these other masks the coaches are wearing. But Andy Reid dressed up as like Snoopy the Flying Ace. And he took his little small prop plane up, and he did some skywriting, and he wrote in the sky above the stadium in Baltimore, which is odd because it was a night game. He wrote, "We are the grown-ups of the NFL. Go back to the kiddie table, Ravens." Signed, Andy Reid. Just like that. It was a methodical, thorough neutering of the Ravens' mojo and gusto and all that stuff. And no matter how many wins Baltimore gets, they still have this in the back of their head. They were unable to stem the tide, unable to do it. And while they did come back in the second half and briefly get within 1 score, even that was a humiliation situation because it was just a case of Kansas City who was just kind of going through the motions there. They needed a wake-up call, and they were toying with the Ravens. Right? They threw, when the Ravens got within a touchdown, if you saw the game, you know what I'm talking about, the Ravens, they thought, we're right back in the game. The Chiefs go down, and they throw a touchdown pass to a fat guy. Fat guy touchdown. 6'7", 300-pound offensive lineman Eric Fisher. Fat guy touchdown. Number 72 in your program. Number 1 in your heart. All right, last word. So on the Chiefs side of the ledger, we're not going to make this all about the Ravens. It was rainbows and lollipops. When the high-octane offense is a clicking, it's like a fine oil painting. It's poetry in motion is what it is. Now, outside of injury, Kansas City is going to have a tiptoe through the tulips during the regular season and the postseason. They're talking about having a home field advantage situation. We haven't seen a repeat champ since the Patriots of the first decade of the 2000s. It's been a while. The Chiefs, not that they're guaranteed anything. They're certainly not. There's a lot of time, a lot of real estate to navigate your way through. You've got to be swashbuckling with your machete to get through this. But outside of snap, crackle, pop, right? Snap, crackle, pop. The other concern would be overconfidence, cockiness, the self-inflicted wounds of complacency. But Patrick Mahomes, man, did he ever put on a passing clinic with wild abandon out there in the field, flexing and strutting around and treating the Ravens defense like a ball of Play-Doh and a child just manipulating the ball of Play-Doh. It was as easy as whatever he wanted to do, he could essentially do for most of that game. Now, the third quarter, they didn't do much of anything, but the rest of that game, it was however he wanted it. We make it your way, which I think is a slogan from a fast food restaurant. Mahomes, back in the day, Mahomes essentially came out and said, good afternoon, good evening, and then he said good night to the Ravens defense. And Mahomes is now 10-0 in September in his career. 32 passing touchdowns, no interceptions, and he has a passer rating of about 125 in the month of September. He's Mr. September. And Patrick Mahomes has used that arm and the Grover-sounding voice that he has to become the new pitchman of all kinds of crapola that he is trying to sell you on television and radio and you name it. He's got it all covered. All right, now we do have some of the reaction from the postgame, the better story, as we have pointed out, in the losing locker room. Let's hear from John Harbaugh, who just admitted the obvious. He admitted the Komodo dragon in the middle of the Ravens locker room.
Well, obviously, we haven't beaten them, so they've outplayed us in all 3 games. If you want to go back for 3 years, but we didn't play well today. They beat us. They out executed us. They out game planned us. They just beat us. So that's the story tonight. Big picture stuff, all that. I don't know. They're better. Obviously, they're a better football team at this point in time. So yes. You win or you learn, and we have a lot to learn from this game right here.
Hey, full disclosure, I love that. No BS, no bull crap about this guy was out and we were sluggish. And no, John Harbaugh just kidding. That's exactly what happened. Rarely do we have a soundbite of someone that actually speaks the truth. John Harbaugh. Shocking. He didn't give some bull crap political answer. He spoke the truth. That's called job security is what that is. All right, here's one more. Lamar Jackson, your team with you as quarterback is 0-3 against the Chiefs. Why is that, Lamar? Explain it to me.
We always start cranking up at the wrong time. We got to come in and finish how we start. Like, we always go opposite, I guess, against them for some reason. We just got to tighten up and play better, that's all.
See, that's kind of excuse making. See, what John Harbaugh said was good. I liked what John Harbaugh. Lamar Jackson, let me go to my list of sports cliche excuses. We just got to tighten things up. Like, I don't know, the entire first half of the game when you were completely useless?